Hey guys, Josh here from Sportitude Running, and in my hand I hold the new Asics Gel Cumulus 23. So, in today's review, what we'll be doing is we're talking about what this shoe is all about, talk about the outsole, the midsole, the upper, do some comparisons between the 22 and now the 23, talk about the foot type that could be considering this shoe, and give you all the information that you need at home to, who knows, maybe throw this into your shoe rotation. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. Okay guys, first things first, let's talk about what runner should be considering the Gel Cumulus 23. Now, it is a neutral running shoe. So what we're talking about there is we're talking about a foot type that has a slightly higher arch, something that looks not too dissimilar to this. So when we're talking about the foot in a static position on the ground through here, there's a bit of real estate between the arch and the ground. When they come through, they transition heel, midfoot to toe off. The central part of the foot will take most of the pressure, maybe a little bit of bias towards that outside as well for that under or supinated foot type before they get ready to toe off out of the gate. However, there are those stable neutral runners out there that do have a static position that looks something like this. The arch is a little bit more splayed, but still when this person comes through their transition from mid-starts, pressure still through the central part of the foot, and they don't have too much tendency to favour that medial side. They'll continually transition through the central part of their foot, more like a second to third metatarsal toe off through the end of their gait cycle. Okay guys, now the 23, the Cumulus 23, is a mid to high mileage running shoe. So there is the Nimbus, which sits above this shoe, which is their max cushioned high mileage neutral running shoe. But the Cumulus franchise for a number of years has just been such an honest contributor to the Asics running range. And the main reason being is it's still got plenty of cushioning underneath the heel and through the forefoot, but you're just reducing the weight ever so slightly underneath the foot. And when I say honest, I mean it because essentially stable neutral shoes like this just provide a nice, smooth, consistent transition. Not too similar from a Brooks Ghost, for example, even like a New Balance 880. They're just good, reliable, honest running shoes. Now, let's get into the engineering of this shoe. So when I tip it upside down, like I do in my shoe reviews, I do like to start from the ground and work my way up. So what you can see there is we've got full ground contact the whole way through the shoe itself. So there is a few different decoupling lines or flex screws strategically placed to provide the ample flexibility for the runner underneath the foot, and not too dissimilar to what they achieved last year with the 22. The main difference here is the actual flexibility or the cutaway into the midsole. So what we have found through here is Asics have just come into the midsole just a fraction more, and the thickness of rubber is marginally thicker underneath this shoe itself as well. So potentially providing a little bit more protection for the midsole. And because they've cut deeper into the midsole, both through the forefoot and this vertical decoupled line, you will provide a slightly softer ride underneath the foot itself as well. And as we touched on before, being full ground contact, both 22 and 23, there is rubber that's been strategically placed in those hard wearing areas, and more often than not, your heel strikers will just require a slightly more durable rubber underneath the heel, and same goes from 22 from last year as well. Moving on to the midsole. So with the 23, we have a slightly different heel to toe drop with men's and women's. So in my hand, I hold the men's running shoe here, and we have a 23mm heel and a 13mm forefoot for a variance of 10mm heel to toe drop. In the ladies, it's marginally different. So we have 22-12, still for that 10mm heel to toe drop. And while we're talking changes from men's and women's, Asics in their lab have done something that they've played around with before in some of the other running shoes, but through all of their data collection, they have obviously found a pattern with where men strike the ground, what angle they strike the ground in comparison to ladies as well. So what they have done inside the shoe itself, I can't show you unfortunately, but inside the midsole they've actually provided a slightly different angle of compression rate through the foam. So when men and women do strike the ground, and this is not the case for every single person, but when they did their cohort of runners and collected all their data, the women tend to strike on more of a lateral component of their heel, so the angle of which they compress the foam needs to be marginally different to what the men do. So it's really clever of a brand to identify that there are gender-specific requirements out there, not only in the heel-to-toe drop, but also the compression rate of foam. So that's just one subtle difference between the men's and the women's. as well as obviously the width, which we'll get to in 2 ticks. Now, touching on the midsole, as I touched on before, it is neutral, so there's no arch support or additional dynamic support system on the medial side. The density of foam on the inside of this shoe is the same as the outside. Asics have their patented gel technology, which is strategically placed underneath the heel, underneath that black line here of flight foam cushioning system, which sits on the top layer of this midsole, just to provide a little bit of softness underneath the foot for your transition through your gait cycle. And while we're talking about the gel, we also do have a twist gel pod, which is placed underneath the first metatarsal, your big toe through here, big metatarsal head as well. Now, what that is there to do is not to provide cushioning, it's just to provide that joint a little bit of support to assist in that load before you then get ready to toe off out of your gait cycle. Okay guys, let's dial into the upper of the Cumulus 23. So we have an engineered mesh up top, and we had an engineered mesh in the 22 from last year. But to the naked eye, there is a subtle variance. There's a slightly closer woven knit, or woven mesh upper, not knit, I'm so sorry, in the 23. And we had a slightly more open weave in the 22. So you're probably thinking you're going to get more ventilation in the 22 versus the 23, but I can certainly say this shoe provided plenty of airflow for my wear testing, and I was really satisfied with the amount of ventilation I got with the 23s. Now, the upper of the 23 is made from 20% of recycled materials. So that's kind of a good thing. I like when brands are doing all that they can to reintroduce recycled materials into their production of running shoes. So let's hope to see it get to 30, 40, 50% in the coming years. But well done to Asics there. And when we're talking about the actual function and features of the upper, we have at the back an internal heel counter, which is no different than the 22. Internal heel counter is that plastic system which sits around the back of your heel, which provides ample amount of support to keep you on top of the function of that midsole. So you won't be moving around and making sure you're dialed in your laces, but a really good supportive structure at the back through here. The collar on the inside, I'd probably say it's a little bit thicker than the 22, but that's my own personal opinion. The other guys who work for us here and did some wear testing last month did say that it was almost identical, but I just found it to be a little bit thicker. Obviously, that's just my subjective opinion. Coming through to the arch area, so what we have through here is a nice amount of depth. I personally find this shoe fits identical to the 22 from essentially the tongue forward. I didn't find this to be too tight or too loose. It was a really nice, comfortable fit in my preferred width being D width, and same thing with the 23 through here. I really like how it fits and feels on top of the shoe itself. And when we're talking about the structure and integrity of the tongue, well, what we have is essentially a tongue that's a little bit thicker. You want a bit of comfort on top of your arch, but it is sewn in. So when I pull the tongue through there, you can see how it's pulled up from below the laces. So it does stay nice and secure. There's no gusseted system on the medial or the lateral side. Probably one thing I'd love to see added to this shoe in the future, but I didn't find it to fall down to the outside or the medial side. So it did still stay in position, which is a good thing. And as we come through to the forefoot, as I touched on earlier, a slightly tighter woven construction, and the light grey areas you can see in and around the black mesh, so it almost looks like a camouflage sort of setup. They are reflective paneling, so it does aid in the early mornings or late at night. If you happen to be running when the sun has gone to sleep and someone has their headlights on you, you should light up like a Christmas tree, which is a good thing, because you obviously want to make sure that you're seen out in the road, and whether you're wearing reflective gear up top, hat or light, or your shoes do light up, obviously safety first. So it's a good little add-on there from Asics, so well done. And while we're talking about the upper, let's just touch on the widths. We have had a subtle change with the widths in the 23 from the 22. I'll touch on the men's first. We have a D standard and a 2E on offer. So that's standard and slightly wider. And the same thing goes for the ladies. We have a B standard and a D width on offer as well. So last year we had the 2A in the ladies, which was a narrower fit, and then we had an additional wider width in the men's here in Australia, which was a 4E. Now that doesn't seem to be the case this season, and who knows, it may return to the back half with the 23, but at this point in time, for the first 6 months or middle 6 months of 2021, the 2 widths, men's and women's, on offer through there. Okay guys, wrapping up the Cumulus 23. In my opinion, it is a slight improvement on the 22. Slightly softer underneath the foot, which I think is a good thing, getting a little bit more cushioning. And the shoe itself hasn't really changed in weight. Being a mid to high mileage running shoe, it's slightly lighter than the Nimbus, which is its older brother and sister. So the weight of this shoe is 280 grams for a men's size 9 and 230 grams for a women's size 7. So by no means are they heavy. They're nice and light and they feel light underneath the foot, but you're certainly getting plenty of protection. It's a good shoe for someone who wants a lighter mileage shoe, and it's also a good shoe for someone who wants to have a shoe maybe to do some tempo sets in or some interval running, but they just purely need a bit more protection. It's going to do it for you, which is fantastic. Okay guys, if you've got any questions, concerns, queries or theories on the Cumulus 23, drop it in the comments section below. If you've been a Cumulus wearer before, I'd love to hear your feedback and what you've thought about that shoe. And guys, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, hit the red button, stay notified, and we'll keep pumping out these shoe reviews for you at home to give you all the information that we can on your running shoe selections. And until next time, stay safe, be kind to each other, happy running, and we shall see you on the road. Take care.